Have you ever, like, been browsing a menu online and seen that little Michelin star next to a restaurant's name?
Yeah.
It's almost like, a secret signal for people who are really into food.
hmm
But honestly, what does it even mean? It can feel a bit, intimidating, like this whole fancy food world with its own secret language.
Absolutely. I think you've touched on something that a lot of people feel. I mean, that little star definitely has a lot of power. And there's this whole backstory behind it that I think a lot of people don't really know about. It's not just like a random award.
Right, exactly. So think of this deep dive as our way of going behind the scenes of Michelin. We're going to uncover where it came from. It's a pretty surprising story. We're going to figure out what those famous stars actually mean, and we'll even look at where you're most likely to find them.
Yeah, and we've gone through all sorts of stuff to prepare articles, FAQs, even the official Michelin guide. We wanted to make sure we could give you the full picture.
Exactly. Our goal is to break it all down, demystify Michelin, give you some interesting facts, and help you understand why it's such a big deal in the world of food. All right, so to kick things off, let's go back to the very beginning. And this is where things get kind of interesting. Michelin. It's not just about tires, right?
No, not at all. In fact, that's actually how the whole thing started. The Michelin Guide was first published way back in 1900 in France. And get this, it was published by the Michelin Tire
A
Company.
new tire company.
Well,
Seriously, I'm picturing like a little blurb at the bottom of a tire ad or
no,
something.
no, it was actually a proper guidebook, like almost 400 pages long. They gave it away for free to anyone in France who drove a car. You can think of it like a very early version of a road trip companion.
So what was in it? Just like tips on where to change a flat tire?
Well, there were maps, of course, but it also had stuff like instructions on how to repair your tires.
Oh, yeah.
Remember, this is back when cars were a lot less reliable.
Uh,
And there were lists of mechanics, hotels, places to get petrol, all the essential things you'd need on a road trip in those days.
Makes sense. So it was actually genuinely useful. But why would a tire company go to all that trouble?
It was all part of a pretty clever plan. The Michelin brothers, Edouard and Andre, wanted to get more people driving. Because obviously, the more people drive, the more they wear down their tires.
Ah, so it all comes back to selling more tires.
Exactly. It was a really clever marketing strategy disguised as, a helpful guide for drivers.
I mean, it's pretty brilliant when you think about it, from getting people to drive more to becoming like the ultimate authority on the world's best restaurants. How did that even happen?
It was a gradual process. They kept publishing the guide, and then in the 1920s, they started charging for it,
Interesting.
which suggests that people actually found it valuable. But the big shift towards focusing on really good food happened in 1926. That's when they really started taking the restaurant reviews seriously.
And that's when the famous anonymous inspectors came in, right?
Exactly. To make sure the reviews were totally unbiased, they came up with this idea of having secret diners go to restaurants without anyone knowing who they were.
Talk about a cool job. But I bet it's hard to like stay undercover while you're trying to really experience a fancy meal. So 1926 is when they started focusing on fine dining. But when did the actual stars come in?
That same year, actually, they introduced stars as a way to highlight the really exceptional restaurants. At first, they only had one star, but then a few years later, between 1931 and 1933, they expanded it to the three-star system we know today.
And I guess those stars aren't just like decorations. They actually have very specific meanings. It's almost like a code for what kind of dining experience you're going to get.
Right, exactly. And Michelin actually explained what each star level meant back in 1936, which is really helpful.
Yeah.
They said that one star means a very good restaurant in its category,
Okay.
or, to put it another way, high-quality cooking worth a stop. So if you see a one-star restaurant, you can be pretty confident that you'll have a great meal there.
Yeah. So a good option if it's nearby. What about 2 stars? What makes a restaurant worthy of 2?
Well, 2 stars means excellent cooking, worth a detour. It's basically saying that if you're traveling and you see a 2-star restaurant, you should actually go out of your way to try it. It's going to be a really special experience.
Now we're talking serious foodie commitment. And then there's the ultimate, the 3-star rating. What does that signify?
3 stars mean exceptional cuisine worth a special journey. This is the highest honor they give out, and it means that the restaurant is so good that it's worth planning a whole trip around just to eat there. It should be an unforgettable experience.
Worth a special journey. That really puts it into perspective. And it's amazing that those descriptions from almost 100 years ago still hold true today. Didn't they change the color of the guide too?
You're right. In 1931, they switched from blue to red, which is the iconic cover we all recognize now.
Makes sense. Okay, so we know the history and we know what the stars mean. But what are those anonymous inspectors actually looking for when they go to a restaurant? It's not just about fancy decorations or like super polite waiters, right?
Exactly. You might think that, but no. The Michelin stars are all about the quality of the food. That's the only thing that matters. Of course, the inspectors will notice things like the service and the atmosphere, but those don't affect the star rating.
That's interesting. So it all comes down to what's on your plate.
Yeah.
But what are they specifically looking for? What makes the food good enough for a Michelin star?
There are 5 main things they consider, and these are applied consistently all around the world. First, they look at the quality of the
Big
ingredients.
sense?
Like, are they using fresh, high-quality ingredients? The second thing is the mastery of cooking techniques.
Okay.
So how skilled is the chef? Can they really bring out the best in those ingredients? Then they consider the harmony of flavors.
Harmony of flavor.
Yeah, it's about how well all the different tastes work together. Is it balanced? Does it all come together to create something really delicious?
That's a good way to put it. And last two criteria.
Number 4 is the personality of the cuisine, which is a bit more abstract.
Okay.
It's about whether the chef has their own unique style, their own creative vision. And finally, consistency is really important.
Of course.
That means that every dish on the menu should be a high standard, and it also means that the quality should be the same every time you visit. They don't want to give a star to a restaurant that's amazing one day and then mediocre the next.
Definitely. So it's not just a one-time judgment. They're constantly evaluating, right?
Exactly. The stars are awarded annually, and they're based on these ongoing anonymous visits. A restaurant can gain stars, lose stars, or stay the same from one year to the next. It all depends on how they're performing.
And they usually announce the new Michelin stars in October, right?
Generally, yeah.
Yeah.
It can vary a little bit depending on the location.
Makes sense. Now, we know the stars are a big deal, but the Michelin Guide actually has a bunch of other categories too, right? It's not just about who gets a star and who doesn't.
That's right. There's a whole spectrum of recognition within the guide. For example, you have Michelin-recommended restaurants.
What does that mean exactly?
These are restaurants that Michelin considers to be very good, but they haven't quite reached the level of a star. It's like their stamp of approval saying, hey, this place is worth checking out.
Good to know. So it's like a reliable choice. What about Bib Gourmand? I've heard that term. It sounds kind of cute.
It is a fun name. Bid Gourmand restaurants are basically places that offer really good food at reasonable prices.
Like a good deal, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They're often described as hidden gems. You can get a really satisfying and tasty meal without spending a fortune. And interestingly, a lot of these restaurants are on Michelin's radar for potential stars in the future. They're kind of like the up-and-comers.
Affordable and delicious. I'm
Yeah.
into it. Is there like a specific price limit for Big Gourmand?
Yeah, for a 3-course meal without drinks, there's a maximum price. It changes depending on the country, but for instance, in Europe, it might be around 36 stars.
Oh, yeah.
And in Canada, it's usually under $60 Canadian.
Good to know. What other symbols might you see in the Michelin Guide?
Well, there's the plate, which they added in 2016.
Okay.
This is basically for restaurants that just serve good food, you know?
Yeah.
They use fresh ingredients, and the dishes are prepared well, but they might not be aiming for a star or trying to keep their prices super low.
So it's a step up from just any random restaurant. And then there's the Green Star, which seems to be getting more and more attention these days.
Right. They started giving out green stars in 2020, and it's a really big deal.
Yeah.
It's all about recognizing restaurants that are committed to sustainability.
Oh, I see.
So they're doing things like sourcing their ingredients responsibly, reducing waste, and minimizing their environmental impact.
It's great that Michelin's acknowledging that side of things. And now they're even giving awards to hotels, right? With the Michelin keys.
Yeah, you're right. They started that in 2024. It's basically their way of highlighting hotels that offer a really exceptional experience.
Cool. So what are they looking for in hotels?
Well, they consider things like the interior design, the quality of the service, and whether the hotel contributes something unique to the local area. It's kind of like their way of guiding travelers to amazing places to stay, not just to eat.
It's interesting how they've expanded beyond just restaurants. So Michelin's become more of like a comprehensive guide to the best experiences. Now, let's go back to the inspectors for a second. Why is it so important that they stay anonymous? It seems like a pretty big deal.
It's absolutely crucial for keeping the Michelin reviews fair and unbiased. If restaurants knew who the inspectors were, they could give them special treatment or try to like impress them specifically.
Makes sense. So the inspectors are like secret agents, just blending in with everyone else. But who pays for all their meals? I mean, they must be eating at some pretty expensive places.
Michelin covers all of their expenses, their meals, their travel, everything. That way, the inspectors are totally independent. They don't owe anything to any of the restaurants.
I guess that makes sense. So after they've done all these anonymous visits, what happens next? How do they decide who gets the stars?
Well, each inspector writes a detailed report about every restaurant they visit.
Okay.
They cover all 5 of those key criteria we talked about earlier. Then all the inspectors get together for these big stars meetings.
Sounds intense.
It is. They basically debate and discuss all the restaurants, and that's where they make the final decisions about who gets a star, who loses a star, and who gets included in the guide at all.
So it's a group effort, not just one person's opinion. Now, the Michelin Guide isn't everywhere in the world, is it? Where can you actually find these Michelin-starred restaurants?
Right now, they have guides for 46 different territories around the world,
Huh.
and they're always adding new places. They want to make sure they're covering the best food scenes wherever they are.
And I know they're in a few cities in the U.S., right?
Yeah. In the U.S., they have guides for New York City, Chicago, California, Florida, Washington, D.C., and Colorado.
Some pretty big foodie hubs there.
Right. And they just added places like Vietnam, Malaysia, Estonia, and the UAE.
That's pretty diverse. It's interesting that they don't cover everywhere, though, right?
Yeah, it's definitely a selective process. They usually work with local tourism boards to decide where to launch a guide. But it also means that there are other awards that are really important in places that don't have a Michelin guide.
Yeah, like the James Beard Awards in the U.S.
Exactly. So in some areas, those other awards fill the gap and help to recognize the best chefs and restaurants. And in Latin America, for instance, Brazil's still the only country with Michelin-rated restaurants.
So for someone who wants to travel specifically to eat at Michelin-starred restaurants, where should they go?
If you just look at the total number of starred restaurants, Japan has the most.
Okay.
France is a close second, though.
Yeah.
And in terms of cities, Tokyo has the most Michelin-starred restaurants in the world.
Wow, Tokyo makes sense. What other cities are up there?
Paris is always high up on the list, and then Kyoto, Osaka, Hong Kong, and New York City. These are like the capitals of fine dining. Paris, in particular, has a huge number of Michelin-starred restaurants.
Makes sense. So switching gears a bit, let's talk about the chefs and restaurants themselves. What does it mean for them to get a Michelin star?
It's a huge deal for chefs and restaurants. It's basically recognition that you're at the top of your game.
Yeah.
It can really boost a restaurant's reputation, give them a lot more attention, and lead to way more bookings. It's often compared to winning an Oscar.
Yeah, like the ultimate award. And it's not given to the chef directly, right?
No, the star goes to the restaurant. But of course, if a chef runs multiple restaurants, they can get stars for each one. There was this amazing chef, Joel Robuchon, who actually held 32 Michelin stars at one point.
32. That's insane. So I bet it's pretty stressful to try to keep those stars year after year.
Oh, absolutely. There's so much pressure to maintain that level of excellence. And if a restaurant loses a star, it can really hurt their business. Some chefs have actually even chosen to give back their stars.
Really? Why would they do that?
It can be super demanding. Some chefs feel like they're being creatively stifled, or they just don't want the pressure.
Mm-hmm.
Marco Pierre White, who was the first British chef to get 3 stars, he actually gave them back because he said it was too much.
Wow. I can see how it could be overwhelming. So for our listeners who are thinking of trying a Michelin-starred restaurant, what advice would you give them? What should they expect?
Definitely make reservations, like well in advance.
Especially for the really popular places, I bet.
Yeah, for some of the top restaurants, you might need to book weeks or even months ahead.
Wow. What about the menu? Do most of these places have tasting menus?
Yeah, tasting menus are really common at Michelin-starred restaurants.
Uh,
It's basically a multi-course meal where the chef chooses all the dishes. It's their way of showing you their style and what they're all about. You might get 5 courses, 10 courses, even more, depending on the restaurant.
Sounds like a real culinary adventure. Do they do wine pairings too?
Oh yeah, that's a big part of the experience. The restaurant will usually have a sommelier, which is like a wine expert,
Oh.
who will choose wines that go perfectly with each course.
That's pretty fancy. And what about the service? What should people expect?
You can expect really top-notch service. The staff will be super attentive and knowledgeable. They'll explain all the dishes, keep your glasses full, and make sure you have a really smooth and enjoyable experience.
They make it seem effortless.
Right. And if you have any dietary restrictions or allergies, Definitely tell the restaurant ahead of time.
Yeah, good point.
That way they can adjust the menu for you.
What about the dress code? Do you have to get all dressed up?
It depends on the restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the super fancy three-star places might require a jacket or something.
Correct.
But for a lot of one-star and even two-star restaurants, smart casual is totally fine. It's always best to check the website or ask when you're making a reservation, just to be sure.
Makes sense. So it sounds like eating at a Michelin-starred restaurant is a pretty special experience. It's not just about the food, it's about the whole atmosphere and the service.
Exactly. It's like a whole performance orchestrated around your meal.
I love that. So as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of Michelin, what are the key takeaways you'd like our listeners to remember?
I think the most surprising thing is definitely the origin story. It started as a guide for drivers from a tire company, and then it became this global authority on fine dining.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
Also, it's important to remember that the stars are based solely on the quality of the food. They have those 5 very specific criteria, and they're applied really rigorously. And then finally, the Michelin Guide is a big deal all around the world. It's not just about the stars, it's about all those other categories too, like the Bib Gourmand and the Green Star.
Absolutely. So next time you see a Michelin star, you'll know what went into getting it. It's a whole process.
Definitely.
And here's a question for all of you listening. Do you think the Michelin system is a good thing overall? Does it push chefs to be more creative and raise the standards of food? Or does it create too much pressure and maybe even lead to restaurants becoming too similar to each other? What do you think makes a meal truly special?
That's something worth thinking about. And if you're curious to learn more, I definitely recommend checking out the Michelin Guide website. You can see which restaurants have stars in your area or places you might be traveling to. And if you're looking for a good place to start, maybe try a Michelin recommended restaurant or a Bib Gourmand.
Yeah, those are good options.
They're a little less intimidating and a little more affordable, but you're still guaranteed a great meal.
So there you have it. The Michelin Guide, from a humble tire company guide to a global culinary institution. Who knew?
It's quite a journey.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.
See you then.